Hi creative friends, this is Soraya and thank you so much for being here. So I am going to be working on this spread over here, but I am not going to be talking about it in depth. I'm just going to be working, and what I'm going to be talking about is something that I think we all face as human beings, but I'm going to specifically be talking about it as it relates to art, and that is, how do we overcome perfectionism? What are some tools that we can use so we can jump over that hurdle of I need to make everything perfect? So the first thing I'm going to do is I think I am going to be using some oil sticks on the face. But like I said, I'm not going to be talking about it, and I'm going to try not to ramble on. I have some notes that I've made so I can stick on point and not like go off on a tangent. So the very first thing that we can do is there is this intention, and I was trying to think about where I picked this up from, and I can't remember, but I'm assuming it came from one of the classes I took many, many years ago, because I've been using this forever. And the intention is, set the intention of making as many mistakes as possible. Now, this is such a brilliant tool for overcoming that need for things to be perfect, whatever that might be to you, because nothing is perfect. And this is an amazing entry point for so many reasons. The first thing is, you are going to be reframing mistakes from being negative to realizing that they are actually opportunities and learning experiences. Like, think about it this way: if you had to take a class in anything, it could be pottery, making music, or whatever it is. Think about if you never made any mistakes. Like, you wouldn't learn. Like, that's a really bizarre kind of mindset that we have with like wanting things to be perfect. Making mistakes is actually it's a wealth of opportunities, because that's how we learn. The second thing is, you're going to be training your nervous system to feel safe with mistakes and so-called failures. Like, a lot of times, the way our school systems are set up, we are not encouraged to make mistakes. I know when my daughter was really young, I enrolled her in like an art-based school, and I think it really helped her to some degree, in the sense that she was encouraged to make mistakes, like even in classes that were not art related, and I really tried to kind of infuse that kind of mindset in everything that we did. So when you set the intention of like, you know what, I'm just gonna make as many mistakes as possible, like, let's see how many mistakes I can make, you're actually training your nervous system to just relax into the whole, oh, mistakes are not something to be afraid of. The other thing you do is you you interrupt your inner critic, because you aren't trying to avoid mistakes. You're actually rewiring your fear response, because normally making mistakes can trigger feelings of shame or embarrassment, or I'm not good enough, or like, what am I even doing in this class, or making this art, or who do I think I am? All those beliefs that some of them might be even subconscious, they are just completely bypassed when you set the intention of, you know what, let me see how many freaking mistakes I can make. Like, what is your inner critic going to actually do with that? It's going to be baffled. It's not going to know how to respond to that. So you're just like completely bypassing your inner critic. And another thing you're doing is you are rewiring your brain to see mistakes in a positive light. So your inner critic is going to be baffled, honestly. Now, the other thing it does is it invokes a sense of play and curiosity, and beginner's mind, which is fertile ground for creativity. Because when we are in perfectionism mode, we're actually operating from fear. And all that tightness and fear is actually the opposite of creativity. Like, how can you create when you're so tight and you're so scared? So being playful and curious is the antidote to perfectionism. And when you set the intention of, hey, I'm going to try to see how many mistakes I can make, that actually just ushers in all of those things like playfulness, curiosity, etc. Okay, so now we're going to go into a few other ways that we can kind of deal with perfectionism when it comes to creativity. I'm just going to interrupt what I'm saying for a second, you guys. I think I'm actually also going to be using oil pastels in this, and I've never done that before, using oil sticks and oil pastels, but I'm kind of feeling it. So I don't want to make a big mess in a bad way, but I'm going to just see like what I can do. And I don't want to mix the oil pastels directly into the oil sticks, but I think I'm just going to kind of like put it on other parts of the painting. So I'm sorry to interrupt what I was saying. But getting back to other ways that we can offset our tendency for perfectionism. If you have any kind of social media accounts, a good thing to do is to share works that are in progress. And I do this all the time, not only on my YouTube channel, but I do have an Instagram account, which I am going to be going back to. I constantly post works that are in progress. They're half complete. And what this does is it builds resilience and confidence, and you normalize the entire creative process, not just the finished product. Another thing to do is to focus on quantity, not quality. So just say you set the intention of, I'm going to paint 30 portraits in 30 days. So you're not focusing on making one portrait, like just fixated on making it flawless. You are focusing on the learning experience. And this builds confidence because the more you practice, the more you experiment, the more you learn from all these mishaps and little things that happen, the more you are going to develop an innate sense of confidence. You're not like performing your art, you're making a habit out of it. And so what this does is you're more internally focused on the entire process rather than outer focused on external validation. So there is a great pottery experiment that was done, and you can even Google this, but basically, and I think it was a potter or an art professor did this experiment, and they had group A and group B. And what they did is they said, okay, with group A, you're just going to make as many pots as possible during this semester. And group B, you're going to make one pot as be most, the most flawless, beautiful pot you can possibly imagine. So for the entire semester, group A was focused on, hey, you know what? I'm just going to make as many pots as possible. I'm not like focused on they have to be a certain way or whatever. And group B, they just were focused on this one pot. Well, at the end of the semester, what they found is that group A, the group that made as many pots as possible, they had the best pots, because quantity means that you are making so many of them that you're not like emotionally over invested in this one piece. And when I have shared exercises about like thumbnails, where you do like 100 thumbnails, or you do the 100 collages or whatever it is, all of these exercises, that's what they're doing. They're focused on the quantity, not the quality of one. So making a lot of something, it might seem counterintuitive, but it really gets rid of perfectionism. And out of the 30, just say you set an intention of, oh, I'm gonna, sketch 30 portraits in 30 days. Well, out of the 30, you might just get one portrait that you really like, but it's okay. It's better than saying, I'm going to create this one portrait and I'm going to work on it tirelessly for 30 days and I'm going to make this perfect portrait. That's a great way to bypass perfectionism. Another thing to do is to set process-based goals. So this ties into what I was saying with just focusing on the quantity rather than quality. So just say you, instead of saying, I, want to paint this like mind-blowingly beautiful painting, instead of like setting that intention in its various forms, you set the intention of, hey, I am just gonna paint for 20 minutes. So this way you are rewarding the process of creativity and not the outcome. And I know it may sound counterintuitive, but these are all things that you can kind of almost trick your brain into like not focusing on perfectionism. Now, I'm sure there are many other tools, you guys. So if you want to share some of your tools for overcoming perfectionism, I would be, so grateful to hear them, because I'm always looking for ways that, I can bypass my instinct for being like, oh, this has to be a certain way. And I'm going to share an experience, part of my story from a long time ago when my work was really tight. So basically, I've shared this before where, like, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, maybe even like further back than that, my work was really, really tight. And I don't like it now when I look back on it. But when I have done a lot of journaling and healing and just, trying to get into the deeper layers of why was that? Why was my work so tight and stilted? And not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with art that is tight and stilted. It just wasn't for me, because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. So if you paint art that's really tight and very detailed and you love it, there is nothing wrong with that. That's your visual language. But it wasn't my visual language, is my point. So basically, what I came to understand was that I was so focused on the external validation, and I was creating work not for me, but for, oh, that's such a beautiful painting of such and such and so, because, say I painted like a still life with some fabric and it looked like fabric and an apple and whatever it was. And I realized that I was not focused on the internal process of creating art that resonated with my soul, but I was creating for external validation. So I'm always looking for ways to bypass that perfectionism streak, because it is not conducive to creativity. It really is not. Now, it is great when you're learning how to do things like, say you want to learn how to paint faces or draw portraits or whatever. It does have its place to, to get things right, to get measurements right, to get, the facial structure right. There is a place for discipline and measurements, and it absolutely, absolutely, absolutely has a very valuable and important and necessary place in the whole creative process. But once you want to depart from that and create work that's more resonant with your soul, and especially in art journaling, for instance, but any type of art really, I think it's important to say, hey, I am not going to create from this place of, perfectionism. Anyways, you guys, I'm just rambling on. But if you've watched all the way to the end, thank you so much. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.